Hello. Hello. I'm late. Well, I'm not late, but I said I was going to come on here early in the morning. Well, earlier. Nope. It's Sunday. I needed to chill. So, hello. Welcome back. Hey, Patty. So, the lights look a little different. It might be a little darker in here, but it's okay. We'll just get through it. It's just for this live. I am working on setting up my new lights in the background. My coffee is gone. I just actually finished my mushroom coffee. If you haven't had mushroom coffee, please do so. I'm obsessed. Hey Cree. I'll probably show you guys how I make my mushroom coffee later. I love it. Okay. I was watching a documentary on the Amy Bradley case. Are you guys hooked? I have a live coming up on that, so excuse me why I was late. I have been deep diving it. It's wild. Oh yeah, that stuff is bomb. Yeah, it is bomb, Cree. It really is. Have you guys heard about that case on Netflix? I'm shook. I also have all of the documents for the Bryan Kohbergers case, and that's what we're covering today. I'm really set on finishing this book. Hi, beautiful Augie. I know, like, it's just me reading up here, but I'm reading the Idaho Four book by James Patterson, and we are on chapter 74. We're almost done. I think I can finish it maybe in this live and then another one. We'll see how much we can get through today. Because I do have lots of stuff planned today. I plan on going live and doing like a lifestyle live later on here and on TikTok. And then I might come back and do an interrogation video. So we got a lot of things to cover. Hello, my beautiful Augie. No, I haven't. Okay. It's wild. It's all over the YouTubes, the Amy Bradley case. We're going to get into it. Not today because my research is not done yet. But I know I've seen it everywhere. She's the one that went missing on the cruise. But we can talk about that on a different live, maybe a vertical that I do later. If you're new here, hello, welcome. My name is Melly. If you're not new here, welcome back. I am still Melly. We do Melly After Darks, and we did a hangout last night, and that was a lot of fun. So thank you for being there for all of you that were. I know it was a little later, so times are different. So we left off on chapter 74 on the part that says, as Olivia reads, an idea starts to form in her mind. This page could be a great resource, a place to ask people for tips, a great place to send video, and a great place to start setting the record straight. So that was when they were talking about, I think it was like Facebook post. We are reading the documents. I feel like my mind's a little warped over this Bryan Kohbergers case, because we've had all this stuff, all this information, and we've been deep diving it for like the last 2.5 years. Then he pleads guilty or makes a plea deal. Then we get the book, which is what we're reading now, which has like new information as well. And it's based off of like real, content, real interviews and sources. And then we get the show on Amazon Prime, if you guys haven't watched that. And now we have the court paperwork. So it's almost like the case is not what we thought, I think, in a lot of the sense. So I'm going to continue. Hello, Streams Rock. Chapter 74, we were reading Moscow, Idaho, November 24th. So this happened on November 13th. So it says the FBI trailer that will act as the agency's mobile command center pulls up to the Moscow police station on Thanksgiving Day. The truck is so enormous, it looked like it might not fit through the gate. It does, just. TV cameras filmed the arrival, of course, and the week's press conference. The chief and his team try to strike a more media-friendly tone, even addressing the fake news out there. Quote unquote, we never heard that Kaylee stated she may have had a stalker. Detectives have been looking into that, and to this point, we have been unable to corroborate the statement, although we continue to seek information and tips. Captain Roger Lanier said, reading from his script, adding that contrary to online rumors, the victims had not been bound and gagged. Just a few days later, the teams obtained a search warrant for Kaylee's Tinder account. And now that we have the court paperwork, I know they're still saying that they were not stalked. I don't believe that. And I'm having a really hard time thinking that Bryan Kohbergers was the only one involved. I'm not saying he didn't do it. That's not what I'm saying. I don't know. I'm just, the more we get information, and I mean, it could have just been him, sure. But you know how they say that they hadn't been gagged, but they had been brutally beaten. And as we've seen in the court documents, if you haven't, I've already done a part 1 and we're going to do a part 2 probably tomorrow. You know, Kaylee was unrecognizable. So I'm just wondering how in a short period of time he was able to do all of this. And it's crazy. Let's continue. Just a few days. Okay, so they got a search warrant for Kaylee's Tinder account. Kaylee's wounds had appeared to reflect the possibility that she had woken up and tried to either fight off her attacker or call for help, and that she was somehow stifled. Broadly, this will make its way into public consciousness courtesy of Steve Goncalves, who cites the coroner and blames the police for not sharing more details. And we know how Steve Goncalves feels. I'm sorry, I apologize. I think I've been calling him Goncalves because I had been hearing that, but it's Goncalves. So I don't mean any disrespect. It just is what it is, right? I had the name wrong. But the public certainly does not know that 2 days ago, the forensic team sent a sample of the DNA they'd found on the knife sheath to Othram, a DNA sequencing and genomics lab in Texas. That's because the investigators had run the DNA through CODIS, the FBI's database of fingerprinted individuals, and it had come up empty. So now, using the new methodology of investigative genetic genealogy, IgG, that has sprung up around the popularity of the public genealogy sites, Othram will try to build a genealogy. Othram will try to build a family tree around it, but the process could take days, maybe weeks. Investigators have also sent off 103 pieces of evidence, including fingernail clippings, hair, I'm like dyslexic today, and footprints to local labs. Law enforcement's interview team has spoken to more than 100 people so far. The chief's victimology teams are building detailed profiles of the 4 victims they're getting to know, as well as they know their best friends. Xana, the charismatic extrovert, Ethan, the all-star laid-back athlete, Maddie, the quieter only child, and Kaylee, the exuberant go-getter. At least one of them was a target. Which one and why? The chief still hasn't got a suspect, so it's understandable that he doesn't have a handle on a motive. I think you're always looking for the way all the way through your investigation. He said, typically the why doesn't jump out to you because you have to piece the whole picture together. And really every piece of something that you get or every warrant that you do, there might be a nugget in that piece that gives you a little bit more of a clearer picture. And maybe not. Maybe you get nothing out of it. Maybe whatever you put in for didn't give you any fruit at all. There's one critical development in the case the chief doesn't share with the media. The team monitoring the CCTV cameras is coming in on the white car seen doing 3 passes around the King Road house between 3:29 a.m. and 4 a.m. At 4:04 a.m., it appeared to make a 3-point turn near the residence, go back and forth on King Road, then take Queen Road, which had a turnoff going behind the house. The car reappeared at 4:20 a.m. and left at high speed. Hey, MJB. Yesterday, the FBI vehicle specialist got a better shot and identified the vehicle as a Nissan Sentra, but as a 2011, 2012, or 2013 white Hyundai Elantra. Oh, I'm sorry, not a Nissan Sentra, but a white Hyundai Elantra. So on November 25th, the day after Thanksgiving, the chief approves a message to local law enforcement agencies to be on the lookout for this specific car. 4 days later, in the early hours of November 29th, over in Pullman, Washington, WSU police officer Daniel Tiengo searches for white Elantras registered at the university. He sees that one, a 2015 model, belongs to a student named Bryan Kohbergers. A colleague of Tiengo's, Officer Curtis Whitman, spots the actual vehicle in Pullman outside a student housing parking lot. He logs it. But white cars are ubiquitous, so are Hyundai Elantras. So since this car appears to be a model from the wrong year, the Pullman cops don't pass this up the food chain to Moscow. They don't yet know that the FBI vehicle specialist has in fact now conveyed to his agency that it's possible, given the shape of the fog light, the rear reflectors, and the available images, that they should extend the date range of the Hyundai Elantra to as late as 2016. Meanwhile, Fry has got his hands full managing another screw up with the media, possibly even worse than the first. This one's from a surprising quarter. On November 30th, Bill Thompson gave a rare interview to a TV reporter named Brian Entin, a rising star at News Nation. And we know that Brian Entin is heavily involved in the case. So this is pretty wild. Ethan and his crew stormed into town like a tornado. Of all national reporters, he's the one getting access. He's gotten to the Goncalves family and Aaron Snell, and somehow he gets to Bill Thompson, who made a rare mistake when Enton asked him about the use of the word targeted. Some of the students and the victims' families, Enton said, have been frustrated not understanding what the word meant. Could Thompson explain? Thompson told Enton in a recorded video interview that targeted had perhaps not been the right word to use. He said that investigators believed that whoever did this was still at large and was specifically looking at King Road residents, but they could not yet say who might have been the target. Enton posted the video of the interview to Twitter. But then, just days later, Thompson spoke to KTVB's Morgan Romero and gave a different explanation. He said that one of the victims was definitely a target, although he did not specify which one. Hours later, Thompson wrote a letter to Romero walking that back. She tweeted a quote from it. Investigators do not believe the murders were random, but we cannot equivocally state the residents or any occupants were specifically targeted. I apologize for any confusion. Piling onto the bonfire of confusion, Moscow police posted a clarification to their Facebook page, and it reads like this. Conflicting information has been released over the past 24 hours. The Latah County Prosecutor's Office stated that suspects specifically looked at this residence and that one or more of the occupants were undoubtedly targeted. We have spoken with the Latah County Prosecutor's Office and identified this was a miscommunication. Detectives do not currently know if the resident or any occupants were specifically targeted but continue to investigate. Chief Fried knows that the PR damage is done. Under pressure from the media, who themselves are under pressure from the Goncalves family and others to get answers, Bill Thompson misspoke. All that progress Fry made with Aaron Snell just got undone and more. Thompson's office puts out a statement saying he will be giving no further interviews. The image of Keystone cops running Moscow has been reignited in the national media. Pete 𝐭𝐿𝐿, a security consultant and former FBI agent, tells the New York Post, what is also happening now is the police, by providing imprecise comments, are creating an erosion of public confidence in them. That's unfortunate because in the end, public confidence is needed to solve this crime. The public is very concerned there is or may be a killer in the midst, and they see no progress in the investigation. The Post quotes Steve Goncalves telling Fox News right after Thanksgiving that he was frustrated because the police hadn't spoken to him in 3 days. We're the same family that found the original timeline. We're the same family that broke into the phones. We tried everything in our ability. In fairness, Goncalves has another source of stress he keeps private. The family has been getting threats in the mail and online. Steve is concerned for the safety of his youngest daughters, but when he tells the police this, the reaction is underwhelming. Tell them to be aware of their surroundings is the unsatisfactory response. When Evan Ellis interviews the chief in the midst of all of this, Fry blows off a bit of steam. He tells Ellis that he's discovered that the national media, disappointingly, is focused on the story and money. But for him, this is not about those things. It's about lives, 4 human lives and families. He doesn't tell Ellis, at least not on the record, what he thinks privately. He has tremendous sympathy for the Goncalves family, but he wishes they would say less to the media. It makes police less inclined to share developments with them, because one thing that would ruin the investigation is for someone to know too much about it and talk about it on TV. I'm not a big fan of Bill Thompson. I know everyone has different opinions, but yeah, I'm not a big fan at all. I think he's shady. But then also when we go back to who was targeted, I think there were people that were targeted. I know that say no, but I do believe Bryan had been stalking 1 or 2 of them, and then maybe the others were at the wrong place at the wrong time, unfortunately. But I definitely think the girls were targeted. Chapter 75. This is November 25th. Christchurch pastor Doug Wilson is ready for the trolls when they come. For 2 days after the murders, everyone has been united in shock, but he known that wouldn't last. It took 2 days for the old fault lines to reappear, he said. So now he's sitting back and reading the online hate mail linking his congregation to the murders. We get slandered regularly, and so it's just all in a day's work, he said of one of the speculations and accusations. Ever since Wilson's father started Christ Church in Moscow in the 1970s, the institution has been a bête noire for the town. Wilson accepted the the seeming local consensus. He and his church are irritating, possibly evil, cult-like presence in their midst. I know they think I kick puppies on my lunch hour, he said matter-of-factly during one such lunch hour as he sat in the book-lined, windowless office in downtown Moscow, Diet Coke on the desk. Partly the friction stems from money. The church is so rich that even though it has around 3,000 members, perhaps 10% of the town's population, it's bought up most of Moscow's prime real estate and filled Main Street with church-owned schools and businesses. New St. Andrews, the church college, the K-12 logo school, the Sword and Shovel bookstore, Booster's coffee house. The church even has its own bar, Tapped. Wilson knows the Muscovites refuse to patronize these businesses. He quite enjoys hearing about the resistance, especially when comment, quote unquote, it's a shame too, because they've got all the best stuff. The Kirkers are members of the church. Christchurch are known as members of the Christchurch are known, a reference to the church's local name, Mother Kirk, stand out of their blonde Caucasian looks and preppy attire. The men wear button-down shirts and jackets. All women wear skirts, a distinction that feeds into the perception of misogyny. The liberal town finds the church's attitude toward women antiquated at best, repugnant at worst. UI professor Kelly Quinnett remembers a 2019 campus talk entitled Toxic Matriarchy, given by the conservative pastor Christopher Wiley with a Q&A session moderated by Pastor Wilson, in which Wiley argued that modern society was suffering because women have basically got too much power. Quinnett was livid that they'd hold such a discussion on the UI campus. During COVID, the police and the Kirkers clashed badly and lawsuits are still flying. 3 of the Kirkers are arrested in September 2020 when congregants gathered outside City Hall unmasked and sang psalms in protest of the city's mask mandates. Donald Trump even tweeted about it, writing, Dems want to shut your churches down permanently. Hope you see what is happening. Vote now. But just a few weeks later, 2 of Wilson's teenage grandsons, Seamus and his older brother Rory, who was a scholarship student at Columbia, were detained and charged with multiple misdemeanors for placing hammer and sickle Soviet Moscow stickers on city utility poles in the middle of the night. They were just in hijabs and flip-flops at the time. Their father, Wilson's son Nate, a screenwriter, was asleep, but he was found awoken and then arrested, charged with helping to make the stickers. The charges against him and his younger son were dropped, but the Columbia scholarship student Rory wound up being convicted of one charge of affixing a sticker to a pole. He's appealed the ruling, and the appeal is on the desk of Judge John Judge. The litigation has cost his family north of 6 figures. So as Doug Wilson reads all the news report criticizing the Moscow Police Department for the handling of the murders, he senses an opportunity. This could be a great PR for the church, and very helpful for his grandson's litigation. He starts to type this weekly newsletter to his congregation. There are 3 things to remember. The first is that the police are currently engaged in a crucial task that God has assigned to them, and we should be doing nothing but praying for their success in it. But then he gets to point 2, the opportunity for litigation around his grandsons. Second, you are all aware of the fact that it was the same police department that arrested some of our members for singing psalms legally. The lawsuits are in progress, but this is all persuaded biblically and out of true principle and does not want to unjustly tar those good cops who had nothing to do with it. So if we give way to any carnal gloating or glee over the fact that our police department is now receiving very critical attention from all over the world, which it is, then we have become part of the problem. Finally, he focuses on the larger PR opportunity the murders have to offer the church and the community. It's imperative, and his congregants do not screw it up. At last, we need to take a few steps back and look at the big picture. Our little town keeps finding itself in the limelight, and it has to be acknowledged that something strange is happening. Meet the Press came and did a story on what was happening here in Moscow, tagging our town as a place where Christian nationalism thing is going on. And then these sensational murders happened. When he's finished, Wilson sits back pleased with his handiwork. He knows there will be eye rolls in the town, but who cares? The pastor described himself as having very thick skin. He regularly invites local law enforcement and other civic leaders to lunch in the back room of the church. They refrain from talking about the lawsuits, but he subtly and unsubtly reminds them of the church importance in the community. It's not unhelpful, Wilson thinks, that the church owns the building that houses New St. Andrews College, which has a CCTV camera posted above the grub truck. He gathers that there's video on it of Maddie and Kaylee walking toward the truck with a guy in a hoodie. talking about someone named Adam on the night of the murders. It's been handed over to the police, a useful reminder to law enforcement of the upside of the church's presence in Moscow. Until recently, that building had sat there empty, no camera. Wilson tells people that Moscow was on a downhill trajectory until Christchurch and its businesses came along. But Wilson would like to be much more than just an economic solution for Moscow. Our desire is to evangelize a town, he said. So the murders, though tragic, are an opportunity for him to step in and preach the need for his church to fill the moral and spiritual vacuum. The house where the students were murdered, 1122 King Road, was in a seedy area, Wilson said. Not somewhere I'd want my daughters living, making the point that seediness, which stems from godliness, brings about trouble, and in this case, murder. Wow. Not somewhere I'd want my daughters living. That's what the pastor is saying. A party town, a party house. Yes, we do know that, but still, it's a little questioning. Chapter 76, November 29th, 2022. Christine Cameron and Alina Smith, the two administrators of the University of Idaho case discussion Facebook group page, start to notice some unusual posts from a member going by the name of Papa Roger. You guys hold on to this thought, okay, about Papa Roger, please. They have no idea what the user is in real life. His avatar is cartoonish, creepingly, seemingly digitally created. It's a profile of a man with graying hair and some sort of military uniform. Papa Roger garners attention very quickly with a startling opinion. Of the evidence released, the murder weapon has a consistent and a large fixed blade knife. This leads me to believe they found the sheath. The evidence was released prior to autopsies. I know people think, law enforcement said that Papa Roger's like a non-existent thing and had nothing to do with Bryan Kohberger. I don't believe that. That is creepy. Exactly, Patty. Who would know that? I do believe Papa Roger was Bryan Kohberger. I don't know why. Papa Roger gets pushed back and he argues with the people who disagree with him. A user named Dustin Stubblefield responds, "Due to the number of victims and assuming each victim was stabbed multiple times, I'm sure that there was visible evidence of a knife guard. For all we know, the investigators on the scene wiped a couple stab wounds clean to look for bruising. I think it's far more logical than finding a sheath. Sheaths are usually attached to a belt." Papa Rogers writes back, "They don't clean bodies at a crime scene. The amount of blood must have been tremendous." Stubblefield says, "Who knows? Finding a left behind sheath seems like a stretch, though." Papa Roger responds, "Why? They are very specific about the weapon, but vague about every other detail." Stubblefield says, "I think it's more likely they did a closer examination on the wounds on the scene than you think." Papa Roger replies with, "Curious, why are you debating the sheath theory so hard?" Stubblefield says, "Because who would carry a sheath?" Papa Roger says, "Who would carry a large exposed knife?" A picture of the K-bar knife is posted for everyone to study. Papa Roger says, "How did the killer hold the knife prior to entering the scene, in your opinion?" Stubblefield says, "I would guess he carried it in his hand from wherever he came from. A knife in a sheath should cause him problems." Papa Roger says, "Which hand?" Stubblefield says, "I don't freaking know. LOL, why would you even ask that?" And Papa Roger responds, "So a knife-wielding person walked from where? And entered the house at what point with a large knife in hand? ? Stubblefield says, "How in the hell would I know that?" Papa Roger says, "Do you carry a knife?" Stubblefield says, "Dude, give it a rest. You sound like a psycho." Members start messaging Christine and Alina asking who the heck Papa Rogers is. Why is he so arrogant? And why is he focusing on the knife sheath? Christine and Alina wonder if Papa Roger is ex-military given his strange profile picture and seemingly expertise in crime. They notice that he posts fairly regularly, sometimes multiple times a day, and his questions and opinions seem to contain a certain macabre insight. Who is he? I believe the killer or killers, this is Papa Rogers in the post. I believe the killer or killers comes from the high side of the house. They were covered in blood after the attack. I feel like blood ran down a few places, but it has been suppressed. The kitchen was dripping blood, but they won't admit it. Did the killer or killers drive or walk to and from the scene? Thoughts? Why did the killer or killers choose a knife as a weapon of choice? Did the killer stop at 4 victims out of exhaustion, convenience, or lack of knowledge? Why do we think the dog was spared? Why did the killer choose that house over all the other houses in the area? How long do we think the killer was in the house? Do we think the killer took anything from the house? And now we have the freaking paperwork from the court that talks about all of this, that they talk about how he did walk out with something. He did take something from the house, maybe a trophy, maybe more, maybe evidence. How long do we think is it he was in there? I think a lot longer than police are saying, because how are you going to brutally kill 4 people, beat 2 of them brutally in the face, cut another one's legs up, clean up, and get out of there, and then see the other roommate? Like, there's something going on here. Why was the dog spared? Why did the killer choose that house over all the others in the area? So because he was targeting one of the girls, right? Hi, Michelle. Christine Googles Papa Roger to see if there's any clues to this person's real identity. All that pops up in her search is the incel Madiar Elliot Roger, the 22-year-old student in Santa Barbara who wrote a manifesto and in 2014 videotaped his plans to murder a bunch of people as revenge for all the women who wouldn't sleep with him. This character of Elliot Roger is very much Bryan Kohberger vibes. Christine clocks this, but the connection seems too vague. Just the spelling of the name Roger for her to do anything dramatic like report him to the police. But neither she nor Alina like his arrogant tone or the darkness of some of his thoughts. So they decide to keep an eye on Papa Roger's post. One reason they are particularly sensitive to the content and the tone of the page is that Olivia Gonzalez, Kaylee's sister, is in regular touch and has become a contributor. And we know Olivia from the recent victim impact statements, which she did amazing, and we have watched here. Please make sure you check out the Bryan Kohberger playlist. Christine has reached out to her on Facebook Messenger, and Olivia responded with her phone number. A relationship developed between Olivia and 2 founders, but there was a bump when Christine asked Olivia to participate in a Vice documentary about the Facebook page founders, and Olivia said no bluntly. But Olivia and Alina continue to talk. Olivia has mentioned that she's pregnant, but wants to keep that a secret. There's too much else going on for that to be a focus. I didn't know that. Hey, Ben, hey, CW, good to see you. Olivia's pregnant? Olivia? She just did a victim impact statement. She didn't look pregnant. Does she have a baby already? I'm shook. The 2 have unofficial arrangement in which Alina passes on any video or tips submitted that Olivia might find useful, and Olivia sets the record straight about Kaylee and the Gonzalez family directly on the Facebook page. No, Kaylee was not on OnlyFans. No, Steve Gonzalez is not promoting any product on TV. No, there was no deal for Kaylee's Range Rover. No, the family never said this attack was targeting Kaylee. Finally, no, I don't know who killed her. I wish I did. And I can promise that I will find him and I will know. But I'm still getting there piece by piece. Oh, she was? I missed that. Why did I miss that? That's wild. Thank you, Augie, and thank you, Mike. November 30th, 2022. Dean Eccles chose this debate deliberately. The first Wednesday after Thanksgiving is chapter day when Greek life reconvenes on campus. We know the fraternity and the sorority community was going to turn out massively for this, Eccles said. It's snowing. It's really snowing, 7 or 8 inches. He cannot believe his good fortune. He used the weather as an excuse to move tonight's candlelight vigil for Ethan, Zana, Maddie, and Kaylee indoors inside the Kibbe Dome. But the weather isn't the real reason he made the switch. Chief Fry told him last week that it would be much harder to secure the venue, maybe impossible if it was outside. The Kibbe Dome has magnetometers at the entrances. It's entirely possible the suspect might try to show up. They need to be ready. So Eccles gave up his vision of an iconic outdoor ceremony and notified the students of the change, but he cited the weather as a reason, not wanting to scare anyone. Idaho's Governor Brad Little is also coming. Eccles arrives an hour earlier to go through the last-minute checks. He sees a crowd of about 30 young people all dressed alike. Despite himself and the gravity of the situation, he chuckles. They're undercover FBI agents. I don't know who told them to dress like college students, he said, but they all look like lumberjacks, plaid shirts, blue jeans, and boots. Still, Eccles immediately feels better. He doubts anyone can get past this bunch. He's not yet met many of the victims' families, and soon some begin to arrive. The Chapins barely make it in time due to the weather. Even without the snow, the drive from La Conner to Moscow is a good 6 to 7 hours. I-90 is closed, so Jim takes Highway 2. I don't even know why it was even still open. It's just me and a couple of other people on the road. He said, it's heavy snow. Crazy. I wouldn't do that again. Stacy remembers that other awful drive from La Conner to Moscow just 2 weeks earlier, and she remembers something else. She wants to make an apology. I really chewed out someone on your staff that day, she tells Dean Eccles when they shake hands, recalling the angry phone call. I know, he tells her with a smile. It was me. The Chapins are ushered through a separate entrance and up to a press box sky high where they can watch the students filing in and where they can be surrounded by FBI agents. From the height, Hunter sees the Kai brothers, all dressed up in coats and ties, walk to the front. He's instantly touched. I knew my fraternity was coming, but I didn't know how many of them, he said. But every single person came. He asked Jim and Stacy if he can go stand with his brothers. They asked law enforcement. The answer is yes, but with a caveat. He has to take the FBI detail with him. A young woman with long, shiny black hair, clad in boots, jeans, and a green plaid shirt follows him. The Kai brothers are confused to see Hunter with a stunning woman who does not take her eyes off of their friend for even a fraction of a second. His brothers don't believe that she's an FBI agent until she sees they're all looking at her and she flashes her badge. The shocked expressions on their face is something Hunter Chapin savors, a moment of fun in an otherwise bleak universe. When the service is about to start, Stacy and Jim head downstairs, agents in tow, and meet Steve and Christy Goncalves. Steve is practicing his speech on behalf of Kaylee and Maddie, but he stops to shake hands. He shows Stacy a photograph on his phone of a man with glasses. Have you seen this guy? It's Maddie's dad, Ben Mogen, he says. Steve seems surprised that Ben is there to speak about Maddie. Maddie was raised by her mom, Karen, and her stepfather, Scott Laramie. They had full custody, so Steve has never met Ben. But Karen and Scott Laramie, grief-stricken, are skipping the vigil. So are the Kernodles. Maddie's grandmother, Deedle, as Maddie called her, later said she stayed home out of fear. But the vigil is televised, so even those who are absent can watch. After introductions from Dean Eccles, Stacy Chapin takes the stage, and in her inimitable, articulate style, she finds a way to touch everyone there. Her message is about life, not death. She draws a portrait of the Chapin family, a family, she says, probably not unlike any others. They play games. They eat dinner together when they can. They listen to country music. They spend their weekends following their kids to various sporting events. She tells the students she's not going to dwell on that awful night. No one can change the outcome. Ethan would want them all to carry on, to keep pursuing their dreams and reaching their goals while cherishing the time they have together, because you can't get it back. Steve Goncalves is up next. With his wife Christy by his side, he strikes a soft tone as he describes himself as a girl dad, constantly amazed by the perspective of his daughter. He talks about Kaylee and Maddie's friendship, taking comfort in the fact that the two besties died together. But he also makes Kaylee and Maddie a promise. We're going to get our justice, he says towards the end. That night, the Chapins' chief concern is well-being of the Sigma Chi brothers. Since November 13th, their fraternity house has been besieged by media knocking and drones flying overhead. Even on this visit, Stacy's best friend, Susie DeVry, has come with them, wakes up in her hotel to find what she later realizes is a member of the press washing her window. Part of honoring Ethan's legacy, Stacy and Jim believe, is looking after the fraternity brothers he meant so much to. So Hunter messages the house in a group text that the family is coming over to be with them and they need to put their phones in a basket and pull down the blackout shades. There's money, he says, for pizza and beer. They gather in the lodge in the same room where Ethan and Zana spent their last night partying. Cocoon in a safe space, far from prying eyes and lenses, insulated against social media, the brothers, still in their suit and the Chapins, stay up all night talking about Ethan, laughing. Some of them get extremely drunk. Some of them cry. Nobody cares. They're living on borrowed time, save for just one night to let rip. This is their moment of catharsis, their moment to connect, remember and treasure Ethan, and they're going to make the most of it. Chapter 78, December 2nd, 2022. Hi, Alcine. I'm glad you made it. The chapel is overflowing with people, many of whom Emily Lant recognizes, but a lot of whom she doesn't. She and Hunter Johnson are back in Idaho for Xana's memorial service and get their stuff from Moscow. Emily had refused to go to the vigil at the university. She was too frightened to go to something huge and public like that. And she'd said no when Jasmine, Xana's sister, asked her to speak at the second vigil in Post Falls the previous night. It was being live streamed, and she didn't want to find herself blowing up even more on social media. Her mom is now following a Facebook page that's a case discussion board to try and get ahead of all of that. But Emily said yes to Jasmine when she asked her to speak at Xana's memorial because the family wants to keep that small. It hasn't turned out small, Emily thinks. Looking around the church, she figures there must be at least 100 mourners, and there's a side room with another 50 chairs. People are standing because there's nowhere to sit. Emily sees the Chapins and the 𝐁𝐞𝐜 brothers. They all look wrecked. It's been a heck of a few days since Thanksgiving. There was the vigil at the school, then the vigil in Post Falls, and now this. There's Josie and Lyndon. They are more together now than they were before. Dylan is there too, but no signs of Bethany. Emily doesn't recognize Xana's mother, Kara Northington. Why would she? But Kara is there out on bail. She'll be rearrested when she fails to report to go to court afterward. The service itself is surprisingly religious. Everyone is often asked to pray. Emily had it known that 𝐁𝐿 Kernodle was religious, but you never can tell. When it's her turn to speak, she pulls out her phone. She spent last night writing out what she'd say. She wants it to be real. She doesn't care what people think. Xana didn't care what anyone thought, so this is it. This is her moment to say everything she feels about Xana, her best friend. And so she begins. Hi, my name is Emily Allant. I would like to start by saying how honored I am to be up here getting the chance to speak about someone who I got to call my best friend. She tells the story of Xana introducing herself to the Five Fives, explaining that her name is pronounced Xanax without the X, how Xana was a light and energy source in every room. I remember the moments, and after all, it is the moments we are left with. For all the moments I have been blessed to share with her, I am grateful. Death ends a life, but not the relationship of that life. We get to keep the moments in relationships. There was a silly sweatshirt she would wear with Eeyore on it, and I found a quote from Winnie the Pooh that says, "How lucky am I to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard." Xana's length of life was shorter than any of us could have imagined or wanted, but the depth of her life was grand. You can look at Xana's short life as a success. If you made your life about happiness and the happiness you gave to others, then she was successful in what truly matters. May you rest in peace, my best friend Xan. When she's done, she and Hunter say their goodbye to everyone. Then Emily heads with her parents to the airport. They're going back to Mexico for 5 long weeks. Hunter will come as often as he can. Emily needs to get far, far away from everyone. She needs to finally sit with her grief. But as she looks back at all her friends, Xana's friends, Ethan's friends, it occurs to her that she'll miss them. In fact, she needs them. And 5 weeks without them is going to be very tough. December 15th, 2022. For once in the morning meeting, the chief hopes that they might be getting somewhere with the DNA on the knife sheath. It's been a meandering process. Othram Labs had checked the sample against DNA in public genealogy databases, such as in Family Tree DNA. Those results had led to low matches with 4 brothers. The Idaho State Police had reached out to one of the brothers requesting he give a DNA sample so that Othram could keep working to build the family tree, but he had refused. So the team had conferenced. On December 10th, Idaho State Police had asked Othram to stop work and hand over its findings. The Idaho State Police had then turned the findings over to the FBI to take the step of running the DNA profile through GED Match and MyHeritage, 2 genealogy databases which support not to permit law enforcement searches. That's interesting. The FBI can legally do this because, as later noted in court records, there is a loophole in the Justice Department policy that permits government agencies to use discretion searching data provided to websites that do not have customers' permission to share it. The chief doesn't know all the details, but it turns out he's feeling optimistic with a good reason. 4 days from now, on December 19th, the FBI gives a tip to Brett Payne. Payne will let her say that the name provided is not the one they previously associated with the investigation. The name is Bryan Kohberger. Now, the investigators can look at Kohberger's vehicle records, which show he owns a white 2015 Hyundai Elantra. The Mascot team will look at the video they've gotten from cameras around King Road to see if the white car had appeared to drive around the house several times that night, and it could be the 2015 Elantra. As it turns out, yes, it could. And when they do a video canvas in Pullman, where Kohberger lives, for the night of November 13th, they can see that at 2:45 a.m., the car is headed north on Nevada Street. but less than 10 minutes later, it's headed on South State Route 270, the road that connects Pullman to Moscow. And when the investigators checked Kohberger's name in their databases, a police body cam shows that on August 21st, a Bryan C. Kohberger was detained in Moscow at a traffic stop, and that the car had a rear Pennsylvania license plate LFZ 8649 that was set to expire on November 30th. It had no front plate, which is permissible in Pennsylvania, but not in Idaho or Washington. The car they captured on video had no front license plate. Further, DMV records will show that on November 18th, just 5 days after the murders, Kohberger registered the vehicle in Washington and received new license plates front and back as required. CFB, oh, sorry. Oh, sorry about that. I don't know if you guys could hear that in the background. So the license plate the new one was CFB 8708. From there, locating the car will be relatively easy. The new plate showed up on a license plate reader in Loma, Colorado on December 13th. And on December 16th, CCTV footage puts the vehicle in Albrights, Pennsylvania, where according to databases, Kohberger's parents live. They will also note that Bryan Kohberger's driver's license photograph shows a man with dark hair and bushy eyebrows. The description that Dylan Mortensen gave of the masked man she had mistaken for a fireman on the night of the murders. Obviously, Fry isn't going to start smiling in his press conferences. He'd like to. I'm not a downer person, he complains to Julie, his wife, but he's hopeful, and no one passes on anything to the victims' families. That's messed up. December 22nd. December 2022. I think the family should have been entitled to everything. I'm just saying. That's my personal opinion. We know Steve Goncalves is really pissed off about that. December 2022. When Steve Goncalves pulls up to the house of the attorney, Shannon Gray, he feels at home. It's weird. The Gray's house is on 5 acres outside of Moscow. Like the Goncalves, the Grays have 5 kids. Like Steve Goncalves, Gray's initials are SG. His license plate is 7SG, a sometime Goncalves family password. Gray is covered in tattoos and wears a trucker hat. He drives a maroon Mercedes G-Wagon and complains that Moscow cops are endlessly stopping him because of it. Even before Steve knows anything about Gray's career, he decides he's going to hire Gray to be his lawyer. He'll later say that it wasn't really his decision at all. The girls, meaning Christy and his daughters Olivia, Autumn, and Aubrey, had already decided. They told him the family needed a lawyer because they were worried Steve would go and say something he shouldn't. They know I'm willing to break the rules, he says. I don't want to catch the wrong person, but I don't want to sit in line of 5 people and wait for my turn to figure out justice. There are things that we can request and things we can do to get in the truth faster. You have to fill out forms to get this evidence released to you. I don't know how to do that. Jack DeCour's aunt, Brooke Miller, knows Gray's wife, Tiffany, an Instagram influencer whose account describes the ups and downs of their larger family. Miller introduced the Grays to the Goncalves women, but they sent Steve to close the deal. Steve applauds the dynamism his girls showed in getting Gray, though he might have gone in a different direction and hired a civil lawyer. Gray is a criminal lawyer. So to Steve, there's much to appreciate about Gray, an unlikely lawyer who cannot let a perceived injustice drop. He feels positive about Gray's prosecution experience, more experience than Thompson, specifically way more murder cases, he said. I'll spend as much money as I got to make sure that we get to the bottom of this, Steve said. The girls, in fact, already thought about how to pay Gray and a private investigator to get out in front of any controversy over the Goncalves family online fundraiser that Brooke had advertised on the University of Idaho Case Discussion Facebook group page. Olivia Post, by no means do we expect anything at all for those looking to specifically help with legal and independent investigation fees. This fundraiser has been started for us. Steve wants Gray, a former prosecutor in the Multnomah County, Oregon's DA office, who's aggressive and not afraid of a microphone, to go shake some trees to pressure the cops in Thompson. Steve explains that his frustration with the cops started to build on the 3rd day following the murders, when, thanks to Olivia, the Goncalves family discovered who Kaylee had been in touch with on the phone, had gotten a hold of the grub truck video, and had been in touch with the ride-share driver, a fraternity house designated driver. Steve says he asked the cops, do you know about the food truck? Do you know about the Uber driver? When the answers to both was negative, he says he exploded. These guys don't even know what the fuck's going on. The family expected to be interviewed by police. Instead, they received a questionnaire to fill out about Kaylee. They'd also gotten a hold of the video crime scene from a neighbor that the cops didn't pick up from them. And they'd asked the owner of a local vape shop where Kaylee had talked about a stalker if he had given the CCTV footage of that to the cops. The answer was no. And now it was too late. The recording had been looped. So when Bill Thompson appeared to be muddled about whether the house, a victim, or no one had been targeted, Steve snapped. I'm shook that like the police didn't find all that information with, the grub truck and the driver and all of that first. I'm really impressed that the family did that on their own. On December 13th, Steve told Fox News Digital he'd hired Shannon Gray because he was frustrated with the police's lack of communication and what he saw as missteps to the investigation. I have a lawyer for a reason, he said. The police talk to his lawyer now. They've messed up millions of times, he continued. But I don't get to say that because what experience does Steve have? He doesn't know. He's just a dad and woke up one day and his life had turned upside down. Gray started giving TV interviews in which he said he sat down with investigators and Thompson and asked for more transparency and accountability. When Chief Fry first saw Shannon Gray on the news, he was bemused. Who is this guy? He wondered. Most people in Moscow had never heard of him. The more the police chief sees of Gray on TV and off, the less he trusts him. It doesn't help that back in January, Gray was suspended from the Oregon State Bar for misconduct. He was reinstated 30 days later. Gray moved to the outskirts of Moscow from Portland earlier in the year. And one of life's ironies, he bought the house next door to Nate Wilson, the screenwriter son of the Christ Church pastor Doug Wilson and the father of the two boys arrested for putting the Soviet Moscow stickers on the lampposts in the middle of the night during the pandemic. Nate Wilson is completely mesmerized by his new neighbors. Gray's wife, Tiffany, strikes Nate as an emotional, passionate person, and he listens rapidly to Gray's life story, which includes an earlier career as a bouncer in a bar and a row with Moscow City Council over halfway house opposite the junior high school that lacked. He felt appropriate oversight. He told Wilson he'd uncover all sorts of corruption and self-dealing inside City Hall, but Nate never gets to the bottom of that story, partly because Gray is always on the road defending clients in Coeur d'Alene and Kootenai County, and now Gray swept up in the murders because he started representing the Goncalves family. Gray is understandably given his stalemate with the police, very sympathetic about the Wilsons family's clash with law enforcement. Nate remembers finding it difficult, borderline impossible, to trust that MPD could get anything done. The chief wants to help the Goncalves family. He wants to get justice for Kaylee. They are getting closer with the investigation, but the battle lines have been so clearly and aggressively defined by Gray that the police chief feels unable to share much, if anything, with them. It's a shame. Yeah, it is. December 16th, 2022. It's dawn and Christine is looking at the Facebook page aghast. She posted an exclusive video that now has news programs calling her constantly. Her phone is ringing off the hook. It shows Maddie and Kaylee on the sidewalk en route from the corner club to the grub truck. Hoodie guy is accompanying them, a little bit off to the side, but it looks as though he's here to help. The two women are not walking entirely steadily. Kaylee asks Maddie, "What did you say to Adam?" Maddie replies, "I told Adam everything." Everyone on the Facebook page and in the media is now fired up over the identity and role of Adam. Oh God, Christine thinks, this is not good. Not good at all. The opposite, in fact, of what her intentions had been. The point of posting the video was to show everyone that hoodie guy, Jack Showalter, apparently had good intentions that night, not bad. She wanted to provide much needed context to the grub truck Twitch video in which he seemed to stare at them and follow them for no reason. The new video showed there was a perfectly good reason. He had been walking with them all along. The video had been given to the police soon after the investigation began by someone who had worked at St. Andrews, but nothing was released to the public. Christine had gotten this video from a man who did not want his name out there in connection via his girlfriend to New St. Andrews College, the building on which the camera perched. The source had followed the online mania and the speculation about hoodie guy and wanted to help clear his name. At first, he'd wanted Christine to show a still, but they ultimately decided that the best choice was the simplest, to just play the video. Prior to posting it, Christine sent the video over to Olivia Goncalves. It turned out that the family knew who Adam was. He's Adam Lauda, a close friend of Jack Decor and Maddie and Kaylee, the former high school basketball star bartends at the Corner Club. The video has gone viral because of the mention of Adam. Who is Adam? That's the headline run by major media outlets, including Fox News and Inside Edition, and it's a topic of numerous posts on the Facebook page. Mark Travelpiece, the owner of the Corner Club and Adam's bosses, is livid, not just because he's gone overboard to protect Adam and all his employees from the media intrusion, but because weeks ago police interviewed them all and they figured the way to protect the investigation was to stay quiet. He knows at once where this video came from. New St. Andrews College, the school funded and owned by the Christ Church, which makes him even madder. They like chaos, he said of the church, and anything that can get the people who are dead set on being in Moscow to loosen their grip and make it easier for their people to come in, they're going to do it. Apparently, on Fox in a split screen with Shannon Gray on December 17th is Steve Gonsalves, who surprises Christine by saying, "We've had that film for a while." Even so, she's glad he's doing this interview to set the record straight about Adam. "I believe the business reached out to us directly after they had given it to the police," Steve says, though his attempt to calm the waters once again roils Christine, who thought she had an exclusive. "The video," Steve says, "was kind of comforting to us because it's just two girls having a good time. Talking about, asking about their bartender, just being girls on their way to the grub truck. We did the obvious due diligence and looked into that, and it was pretty clear that this individual was not part of the investigation as far as a suspect." Phew, Christine thinks. But even as the speculation about Adam is dying down, another problem appears. Papa Roger. This Facebook page is meant to be a place to discuss the murders, not rant. His posts continue to needle other members. It's not just his arrogance, it's some undefinable feeling of aggression. He keeps making snide comments like, "Why is proof so hard for you? Help me, help you. Maybe you should consider post-secondary education. And do you have emotional issues?" On December 14th, he posted about law enforcement. "Quote unquote, fight me. Ellie is no closer to solving this than they were 30 days ago." And 2 days later, he says, "The killer has a sexual dysfunction. Thoughts?" And in one of those instances of seeming overconfidence of possible having peculiar insight into the case, when he was asked how long he suspected the killer was in the house, Papa Roger answered 15 minutes. On December 22nd, he posted, "The killer is not in the victim's immediate circle." And on December 24th, someone asked, "You think the assailant has left the area?" And Papa Roger said, "Likely." That is crazy. Sitting in his office at the police station, Chief Fry is interested in following this. This team has appointed an investigator to track all social media discussions about the case, including the Facebook page. By now, the police have a good idea of who their suspect is. And Papa Roger is right. The suspect is not in the victim's immediate circle, and yes, he has left the area. The question for the investigators is, why is Papa Rogers right? Is it because he knows the suspect or because he is the suspect? December 19th, 2022. It's evening when Brett Payne gets the phone call from the FBI suggesting that a Bryan Kohberger might be worth looking into. It's the call he and the team have been waiting for. The DNA from the knife sheath was the one thing we thought we had was a very strong piece of evidence, Payne will later say. The next morning, via Microsoft Teams, the FBI walks him through how they constructed the family tree and why they believe Kohberger should be looked at. Payne doesn't know much, if anything, about investigative genetic genealogy. He's never used it before, so he finds the details they give him above his head. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that the tree includes the Kohberger family based in Pennsylvania. On December 23rd, the investigators have enough information for Payne to apply for a warrant to pull Kohberger's phone records to check the location of the cell towers pinged by his phone in the early hours of November 13th. Payne learns from AT&T records that Kohberger's cell does indeed appear in the broader area early that morning. 2:42 a.m. Network near Pullman picks up the cell phone near his house heading south of Pullman. 2:47 a.m. Phone disappears from the network. 4:48 a.m. Phone reappears on a network covering I-95 south out of Moscow. 5:30 a.m. Phone shows up on the Pullman network again. 9 o'clock a.m. Phone appears to leave the Pullman network. Between 9:12 a.m. and 9:21 a.m., phone shows up on the network around 1122 King Road. 9:31 a.m., phone is back on the network covering Bryan Kohbergers' home in Pullman. So this is where we think that he goes back to see the scene and what is going on, right? Between 9:12 a.m. and 9:21, his phone shows up on the network around 1122 King Road. So the disgusting monster went back. That's interesting. I think the psychology of that is interesting. Like, why would you go back to the scene? You want to be like proud of it, or you were worried, you know, that's really creepy. In fact, the phone, when they retrieve it, will also show that an hour later, around 10:30 a.m., while he's still at home, Kohberger takes a strange mirror selfie in what appears to be the bathroom in his apartment. The bare shower rod, empty towel rack, and the white towel work are visible in the background. His dark hair damp, he's grinning and giving thumbs up, his face deathly pale. He's wearing over-ear headphones and a clean white dress shirt, buttoned all the way to the top. In order to see if Kohberger had stalked the King Road house or anyone in it, Payne and the team get another warrant and review earlier records of the phone calls as well as its locations. Since Kohberger opened the account in 2022, the phone appears to have been close to the King Road house on at least 12 occasions. All except one occurred late at night. So, finally, the puzzle is coming together. Now it's time to find a way to prove the very compelling but still circumstantial theory that Bryan Kohberger is their man. The simplest and most obvious way to do this is check his DNA and see if it matches the DNA on the sheath. The FBI reaches out to its Philadelphia field office. Plans for surveillance operation in that area are set in motion. The chief knows better than to count his chickens. But this year, Christmas feels more bountiful than he had dared hope. He even manages to take the whole day off to be with Julie and the family. And because he's feeling optimistic, he writes back to his emailer in Florida, the one who tells him this will likely be unsolved like the John Benet Ramsey case. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas. God bless you. The guy writes back, you better hope God blesses you, because if not, you're going down in the history as one of the worst. We shall see, thinks the chief. We shall see. Most people who do crimes return to the scene of the crime. They want to see the results of their aftermath. Pink HCB, yeah, that's psychopath. December 28th. Olivia, Steve, and Christy Goncalves are seated together on their black leather couch, tissues in hand. A large photograph of Kaylee hangs behind them. They are giving their first in-depth interview, not to a reporter from News Network, but a cyber sleuth from New York, Olivia Vitale, a brunette in her 20s. They've chosen Olivia rather than a journalist from an established news network, Steve says, because in going through Kaylee's TikTok, he learned that Kaylee watched Olivia's interview under her moniker Chronicles of Olivia. Could this be a sign that Olivia is the chosen one to find whoever killed Kaylee? It feels like this is Kaylee approved. And if that can play a role in solving the crime, then this makes it a lot better. That helps with the process of healing, he says on camera. Toward the end of the interview, Olivia explains that she had been taking it upon herself to be the Goncalves family's own cyber sleuth. Her mother, Christy, tried for a week to follow University of Idaho case discussion Facebook group page, but quit because it made her too upset. But Olivia understands what a treasure trove, a hive mind of research exists online. Olivia speaks slowly and empathetically to the camera. I'm in every group I can be. I monitor every post. But what if he slips up there? What if he's in one of those groups? What if he says something that's a little too close? That gives me a bad feeling. That's why it's a long shot, but it's all I can do. I can take that time. I can read those posts. I'm physically capable of doing that, so I will. Olivia devotes all her waking hours to the work because who knows what or who she will find. The same day that the Goncalves film with Olivia Vitale, the chief and his colleagues field a query from NBC about a Texas-based self-described psychic and TikTok sleuth. Ashley Gillard, a creator of Ashley Solves Mysteries, has now posted hundreds of videos accusing University of Idaho associate history professor Rebecca Schofield of orchestrating the murders. I don't remember that in this case. I'm shook. Professor Schofield has never met any of the 4 victims. She and her husband and young children were in Portland, Oregon when the murders occurred, but this doesn't matter to Gillard, whose evidence is based solely on her clairvoyant insights. She keeps posting that Schofield had at some unspecified time a romantic relationship with Kaylee, and when she was jilted, she hired a hitman to prevent the affair ever coming to light. Gillard identified the hitman as Jack Decor. Schofield hired a lawyer in Boise, former U.S. Attorney Wendy Olson, who wrote twice to Gillard asking her to cease and desist with the lunatic claims. But the psychic doubled down and posted even more. On December 21st, Schofield sued Gillard for defamation. The suit claimed that her family's safety had been put at risk. So today, NBC is on the phone to the police asking if Schofield is, in fact, a suspect. By now, Fry, Snell, and the communications teams know better than to bother squawking in disbelief when the crank questions come. They give a measured statement. At this time in the investigation, detectives do not believe the female associated professor and the chair history department at the University of Idaho suing a TikToker used for defamation is involved in this crime. I know I said at one point there are no dumb questions, Fry later said, but I was wrong. There are. I don't remember this. I don't remember this at all, this professor being accused. Do you guys? Let me know in the chat. Hey, Jesse. December 28th. The Washington State Police Chief, Gary Jenkins, is finishing up for the day when he sees that James Fry is calling his cell phone. Can you meet at our police department? Fry asks. Jenkins and Fry are old friends. Jenkins was recently reassigned to WSU, but prior to that, he ran the Pullman Police Department for 12 years. It's highly unusual for Fry to be as secretive and tight-lipped as he's been about the Idaho Four as the victims are coming to be known, but the chiefs have helped each other out on dozens of cases. Jenkins knows what his friend is trying to prevent, somehow tipping off the murder. So, as he drives over to Moscow's police station, he assumes Fry holding a second multi-agency briefing, similar to the one where they were asked for help for searching for the white Hyundai Elantra. But when Fry meets Jenkins at the front door of the station, the WSU chief senses this is different. Jenkins follows Fry upstairs and into the conference room and sees a sea of faces. He realizes the entire team of investigators is gathered here, waiting for him. What they were about to tell him, Fry says, is completely confidential, not to be shared with even this agency. In that instant, he realizes why he's there. They found whoever did this, and this person is at Washington State University on his turf. His heart sinks. Brett Payne says, "We think we know who the suspect is, and he's in the WSU housing." And then he says his name, Bryan Kohbergers. Odd name, Jenkins thinks, but it's in an odd, familiar name. It rings a bell, and then it comes to him. "I know that name," he tells the people in the room. He sees astonishment on their faces. "I think I interviewed him for an internship position when I was Pullman chief. I probably have his resume and cover letter in my files." He goes straight back to his office and sends them over. Payne and the team receive them. Their contents make it straight onto Payne's draft affidavit, the one he'll submit providing evidence to justify an arrest warrant for Kohberger. It already contains what the police have discovered about the path of the Hyundai Elantra, Kohberger's cell phone records, and what Dylan Mortensen saw that night. Payne now adds it to the following. Pursuant to records provided by a member of the interview panel for Pullman Police Department, we learned that Kohberger's past education included undergraduate degrees in psychology and cloud-based forensics. These records also showed Kohberger wrote an essay when he applied for an internship with the Pullman Police Department in the fall of 2022. Kohberger wrote his essay he had interest in asserting rural law enforcement agencies with how to better collect and analyze technological data and public safety operations. Kohberger also posted a Reddit survey, which can be found by an open source internet search. The survey asked for participants to provide information to understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision making when committing a crime. We have read that here, by the way, the paper he did for his class. I will link it in the description, but it's definitely on the Bryan Kohberger playlist, so make sure you check that out. Oh, I didn't know that. Thanks, Melissa. Olivia had another baby girl named Pepper. That's a cute name, and I didn't know she was a mom. I'm shocked she looks so young. While Payne is writing, Jenkins is sitting in front of this computer, already running his to-do list through his mind. He's getting ready for what he'll say when he's allowed to share what he knows, and for when his team gets the green light to write the warrants for the Moscow team to search Kohberger's home and office. She has 4 kids. Wow. Thank you for letting me know. Thank God he's spoken to the guy in charge of the camera security along Stadium Way, the main street in Pullman. Soon after the murders, they'd agreed it might be worth holding onto the footage of the night of the murders beyond the regular retention of 60 days. He sees in his database that Pullman cops pulled over Kohberger in October, and now he sees that his guys, Officer Tiango and Whitman, had identified the car a few weeks back. The Washington State University's community is going to freak out when Kohberger is arrested. Jenkins knows this. He's got a team of counselors on standby for the cops. He'll almost certainly have to offer their services to the university. He goes back to his database. What else was there about this guy that we missed? Was there a break-in near? There was a break-in near his apartment reported recently. Wasn't there some story about a student being followed to her car? What else? His train of thought is interrupted by his phone. It's Fry, thanking him for Kohberger's resume and cover letter. No problem, says Jenkins. Oh, and Gary, one more thing, says Fry, letting out a small chuckle. Aren't you glad you didn't accept his application? More than you know, replies Jenkins. The more you know. Yeah, I know. This is really, really detailed in things I didn't know about, like the police department and whatnot. Albright's, Pennsylvania, December 27th, 2022. Get in. Get the garbage. Get out. Don't be seen. Don't be seen. The FBI surveillance team can tell Kohberger is skittish and that he knows what he's doing. It's pitch black, freezing. The agents are cloaked by night and by the dense woods of the Poconos. It's the time when people most are sound asleep, particularly in the dead of winter. And yet, astonishingly, at 4 a.m., Bryan Kohberger walks out of his parents' house carrying garbage and wearing nitrile gloves. He dumps the bag in his neighbor's trash can, then scurries inside. But a few hours later, he's out again, gloved and depositing more garbage in the neighbor's trash cans. Back and forth, he carries out bags several times in the hours to come, always wearing gloves. The agents are ahead of him, though. They know time is of the essence. In the early hours of the morning, they fish the garbage out of the Kohberger's bin and the neighbors. According to the law, once trash is placed into a bin or on the curb, it is public property. They fly it to the Idaho State Lab. By December 28th, they've got what they need. They alert Pennsylvania State Police, stationed at Stroudsburg, to be ready. Bryan's DNA was not in the trash. He must have worked overtime to ensure that. But his dad's DNA is. And his dad's DNA shows a likelihood of being the father of the person whose DNA is on the knife sheath, a likelihood that, according to the lab, would not be shared with at least 99.9998% of the male population. That's enough for Payne to finish his probable cause affidavit, sign it, and walk it over to the courthouse for the signature of Judge Megan Marshall. From there, it's emailed to Pennsylvania. Justin Larry and Brian Knoll, 2 veteran troopers in Pennsylvania's Criminal Investigation Division, fill out the paperwork they need to get a judge to sign the arrest warrant and the other seizure warrants. At 4:35 p.m., Judge Margarita Patty Worthington of the Monroe County Court of Common Pleas signs them. Now it's go time. The Pennsylvania State Police Special Emergency Response Team, CERT, gets ready for a night raid. December 29th, 2022. It's 7:10 p.m. and Christina's hunched over her laptop watching Papa Rogers cross a line. He writes to one woman, "Please elaborate, you attention whore." And to another he says, "You are full of donkey excrement." Christine has asked a friend, Deb Cooley, to oversee the page when she and Elena are busy. Deb's technical title is page moderator. She calls Christine. "This guy's going crazy," she says. Deb has had to delete 4 of his posts in the space of a few minutes. Christine tells Debs to go ahead and ban him. "We have strict rules about name-calling other people, belittling other people, swearing at them, or trying to meddle in their real life," she says. "But when you ban someone, you delete the footprint of their post." This is not something that worries Christine in the moment, but later she will wish she screenshot absolutely everything he posted before they banned him. An hour later, she sees he created a new Facebook page called Moscow, Idaho Murders, Anything Goes. It's a collage of Instagram photos, chiefly from Maddie's account, although there are a couple pictures of Kaylee. Oh well, Christine thinks, Papa Roger is trying to compete with her. Let him try. But the next day, he goes dark. No post, nothing. When Christine looks at her Facebook messages to find the correspondent, she sees the messages are gone, as his creepy picture. Now, that is weird. That doesn't need to happen after a ban. She doesn't know if he deliberately styled himself after Elliot Roger or what his deal was. On December 30th, the news burst onto TVs around the country. The police have made an arrest in Pennsylvania. When Christine compares the features of the guy in the handcuffs on her TV screen to the picture of Papa Roger, she sees an uncanny resemblance. And she starts to wonder, was he right there under her nose all this time? Is Bryan Kohberger also Papa Roger? I did see that Melissa, Bryan Kohberger's sister, and him are twins. And I'm like, what the hell? It was really creepy. Albright's, Pennsylvania, December 29th, 2022. The emergency response team readies the explosive, the flashbangs they'll use for the dynamic entry. It's the only way to handle dangerous arrest. You've got to protect the team, Fry said. It's all about creating a diversion. He did his part to divert Kohberger by giving a short statement earlier that evening in his office. On camera, he announced that 1122 King Road would be visited by a cleanup crew on Friday to deal with the biohazardous material. He also thanked the public for the tips. Almost 20,000 had come in. His entire statement took 1 minute. If Kohberger was watching, and chances were he was, he'd have no idea from the chief's grim expression and the matter-of-fact delivery that outside of his window around 40 highly trained members of the Pennsylvania State Police SWAT team are getting ready to enter his parents' house. Fry on the other side of the country knows from personal experience exactly how this is going to play out. Back in 2011, Fry's ride-along partner, 𝐁𝐞𝐥𝐿 stood on a ladder looking into the room at the Best Western Hotel where a UI assistant professor of psychology, Ernesto Bustamante, was holed up with 6 guns. He had just shot dead his student, Katie Benoit, with whom he had a romantic relationship. The cops wanted to get inside the room before he could shoot himself or anyone else. They had shot canisters of gas through the window to persuade him to come out. 𝐭 goal was to explain what was going on and calm the professor down. But with no warning, the SWAT team threw a flashbang through the front door into the gas, temporarily blinding 𝐭 and almost knocking him off the ladder. The chief climbed up the ladder to rescue his friend who recovered. But Bustamante had killed himself by the time the cops had gotten into the rooms. That was not ideal. So Fry knows the playbook they'll likely use in Monroe County. The team in Pennsylvania would use flashbangs as a distraction. They'd likely throw one through the front door or run a diversionary device through, say the back window or the kitchen. The combination of the loud bang and the bright light usually stunned the occupants and gave them time to get into the room. The team in Pennsylvania wound up doing more than this guarantee access. It was later determined that they'd blown out several windows and several doors. They find Bryan Kohberger awake, dressed in shorts and a shirt. He's standing in the kitchen wearing medical-type gloves, putting trash in Ziploc bags. They surround him at gunpoint, zip-tie his hands, and stuff him in a police car. Then they ransack the house and his car for anything and everything covered by the warrants. A few hours later, Kohberger is sitting in the Monroe County Jail. He's being swabbed for DNA. After initially waiving his right to counsel and agreeing to speak with law enforcement without a lawyer, he changed his mind and asked for one. At approximately 7:15 a.m. local time, Gary Jenkins accompanies the Moscow PD team with warrants to search Kohberger's apartment in Pullman and his office on campus. At 1 p.m., James Fry ascends to the podium at City Hall. With Bill Thompson behind him on the left, he's finally able to say the words that he hopes will deliver the knockout blow to his numerous critics. Last night, in conjunction with Pennsylvania State Police and the Federal Bureau of Federal Bureau of Investigation, detectives arrested 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger in Albright's, Pennsylvania, on a warrant for the murder of Ethan, Zana, Madison, and Kaylee. Later that night, Fry's Florida email writes, "We'll see if you got your right guy." Fry wonders if this guy will be skeptical once Kohberger is in custody in Idaho and he's read the probable cause affidavit. Because if ever a document demonstrated good police work, Fry thinks this is surely it. Part 4 on the run. November 13th, 2022. The drive west from Moscow to Pullman en Route 270 can take just minutes. On the back roads, it can take hours. When Brett Payne's affidavit becomes public, it's explained the police's belief that Bryan Kohberger took this Cretaceous route. According to the affidavit, after the murders, Kohberger's Elantra left Moscow, headed south towards Genesee, then turned west to Uniontown, which is not so much a town as a shack surrounded by miles of cornfields. If Washington State University kids had been drinking in Moscow and don't get pulled over by the cops, they'll risk the back roads, well known to be deserted during the day, unlit at night, and treacherous with snow and ice in winter. But Rand Walker, the Moscow therapist, opined that to someone who has committed murder, the road's most dangerous facets would become conveniences. He just suggested that a person could toss a murder weapon into the surrounding snow-covered fields, and the chance that anyone would find it was negligible. That early morning, according to Payne's affidavit, it took Kohberger over an hour to make his way back to Pullman, 50 minutes longer than it took to drive the 8 miles on 270, but he stayed home for less than 4 hours. At around 9 a.m., according to Payne, he left Pullman and returned to Moscow. Not just to Moscow, but to the very scene of the murders. Every criminologist knows that the more emotional the crime, the more likely it is that the criminal will revisit the scene. Kohberger's phone pinged on the 1122 King Road network between 9:12 and 9:21 a.m. It was the last time that the cops saw his phone use the Moscow cell network. And then the cops believe he went home. His cell phone records show him arriving back in Pullman area at 9:32 a.m. But Kohberger wasn't done driving for the day, not by a long shot. Just 3 hours or so later, his cell records suggest he made the 40-minute trip from Pullman to Clarkson, Washington via U.S. Highway 195, where cameras saw him at Kate's Cup of Joe coffee stand, and then at 12:46 p.m. at the Clarkson grocery store, Albertsons, where he purchased unknown items and left at 1:04 p.m. Students of local crimes, and Kohberger was most certainly one of those, knew that Clarkson was a good place to throw things into a river. 12 years earlier, Charles Capone strangled his estranged wife and threw her body into the river. It was never found. Bill Thompson got the conviction only after an accomplice talked. Next, Payne wrote, Kohberger returned to the country roads he had been driving the night before. His phone pinged in the rural backwoods of Johnson, Washington, 2 hours from Lewiston, between 5:32 and 5:36 p.m. Then it vanished from the network for 2.5 hours from 5:36 p.m. to 8 p.m. Payne didn't account for what happened in those hours. But Kohberger's defense, when he got one, wrote in court papers that the police never found the murder weapon, nor did they find any of the victim's DNA on his clothes or car. In fact, the knife sheath appears to have only been his only mistake. Gary Jenkins said, from what I've heard of his activities afterwards, he was pretty sophisticated in knowing how to get rid of DNA and whatever else he needed to do. I don't know if he went to Lewiston, but he certainly did a lot of driving around. I've said that from the beginning, I find it really wild that there was nothing of evidence left there. Because if he brutally beat and stabbed 4 of these people to death, I just feel like he really did do a good job in cleaning it up, or someone helped. I don't know. I know that's a crazy thought, but to only have left DNA on the knife sheath when he beat Kaylee so bad she was unrecognizable, I'm like, how did no DNA get on him or his stuff, or vice versa? November 14th, 2022. Ben Roberts has his mind on end-of-term exams, so he barely notices the spot where Bryan Kohberger usually sits in Wilson Short Hall is empty today. Ben's head is filled with projects and deadlines. Plus, he's just bumped into someone in the financial technology program who has news of 4 horrendous homicides over in Moscow. University students stabbed in their bedrooms in the middle of the night. That's completely horrible, Ben thinks. He tries to put it out of his mind, goes back to focusing on his classwork. But later, members of the cohort and Ben will think hard about Bryan's absence that day and what it meant. They clocked it because they decided they needed to create a paper trail, a record of what Bryan said and did, just in case something unexpected happened. If he were to lodge a complaint against one of the professors, for instance, we felt he was creepy, Ben said, but harmless. Bryan is weird, but he's not evil. But the next day and the day after that, Ben starts to see a slight change in Bryan. He becomes a bit lighter, more animated. Ben ascribes it to the end of the term coming and the filters coming off. Something about his appearance is a little looser. He's grown stubble, but he also hears Bryan's grading of the undergraduate's papers is changing dramatically. Everyone, women included, starts getting high marks. Bryan stops writing essays on their essays. Some of the students are shocked, but also relieved. Ben hears the gossip, but he doesn't pay attention to much at this time. None of the cohort does. Their focus is on exams and grades. They came here to get graduate degrees, so they find good jobs. Ben assumes that's what they'll want. Bryan must too. But when Ben thinks about it, he realizes Bryan doesn't talk much about his plans for the future. Still, Ben assumes he has them. Why wouldn't he? November 17th, 2022. Some of the Washington State University kids skipped town early for Thanksgiving. The murders over in Moscow have freaked everyone out, so the receptionist at the medical center is glad when one of them, at least, keeps his scheduled appointment. The kid's name is Bryan Kohbergers. He comes in a North Face jacket, tall, thin, pale, eyes that bug out. He's a talker, goes out of his way to chat to all the staff, charm them. He stands out. The receptionist doesn't usually remember everyone's name, but she'll remember Bryan's. Her boss doesn't usually comment on anything of the patient, but even she says, he's so nice and charming. The receptionist agrees. Before he leaves, Bryan schedules an appointment for the next spring. See you then, she tells them. She and her colleagues will look forward to that. He put the weapons enclosed in a container with a lid and then threw them in the water? In the river? Possibly. November 18th, 2022. So what do you think about the murders in Moscow? Peggy at the State Department of Licensing in Pullman is making small talk with the tall, thin Washington State University student at the front line who has come to exchange his Pennsylvania plate for 2 Washington plates for his white Elantra. His name, according to the forums, is Bryan Kohbergers. She and her 5 colleagues regularly make small talk with their customers. They pride themselves on running a government outfit that's got some character. They allow pet dogs to run around. They don't want their customers to have a run-of-the-mill experience just because it's vehicle licensing. They want the experience to be memorable, even fun. They've got a reputation they are proud of. So Peggy doesn't hesitate to get into the murders with this guy in order to pass the time. Horrific, isn't it? He replies. She later says there was nothing out of the ordinary about their conversation. He's so happy to chat as she is. Frankly, it makes people feel better about what happened to blow off steam together. It's a productive coping mechanism. The guy says he's shocked, as they all are, nervous too, that the murder is on the loose. He wants to know what she thinks. Who would have done that? Is the murders among them? What about the cops? What about what the cops said? It's such a perfectly normal exchange that, given the circumstances, Peggy doesn't think twice about it. But then after he's arrested, when she sees his face on TV, it hits her. The guy she had perfectly normal chat with about the murders was changing his plates to try to get away with it. She can hardly believe it. December 2nd, 2022. To kept from getting blood all over his car, put it in a trash bag. Yeah, I believe that. At 1:45 p.m. on December 2nd, 2022, Rose Perez, a local hairstylist, sees that one of her regulars, Bryan, is coming in for his usual skin fade 35-minute hair appointment. No big deal, she thinks. Bryan has always been nice, polite. He started coming to her in July. Since then, he's popped in every few weeks and become one of her regulars. He left her a voicemail yesterday asking if she would fit him in the next day. She was able to see him at Powers Barbershop just off the main street in Pullman, where she works most days. So today he shows up. As she clips using the scissors and the blade, they talk the way they usually do. She learns he'll be heading home to Pennsylvania for Christmas soon, but he plans to be back in January. It's a routine visit on a routine day. But in 4 weeks, Rose won't think anything about him or him was routine. Rose won't think anything about it or him was routine. When she sees his mugshot on TV, she falls on the floor. It's crazy to find out I interacted with this person, she later said. I touched this person's hair. I made this person look and feel good about themselves. Like everyone whom Bryan ran it into over the next few weeks, she wonders if she missed any signs. But Bryan is a good actor. He's confident. And the Pullman police have no idea that the suspect is in their midst or what he looks like, or in fact, anything, because for once in an unprecedented fashion, Mosca hasn't been looping them in or sharing any details, and that makes them unhappy. Glenn Johnson, the Pullman mayor at the time, later reflected, everyone was so frustrated. Where's the information? They kept asking. The Pullman cops have an unwritten rule to have less than half a tank of gas in their cars in case Moscow needs them to pursue someone who committed a crime there. But now the Pullman cops are sitting in their cars idle. They have nothing to go on. When Washington State University Police Chief Gary Jenkins considers how Bryan resumed his normal activities in Pullman in the days and the weeks following the murders, he believed his actions denoted a growing confidence. I would think with every day that went by, he wasn't caught, his chances were getting better and better, that he wouldn't be, Jenkins said. But cockiness, it turns out, can be misplaced. December 2022. It's one of the last classes of the semester, Criminal Justice Processes and Institutions, a course taught by Greg Hemmons in Wilson Short Hall. The topic of the recent murders in Moscow is brought up for class discussion. For instance, what is legally on the table for the murder when they've caught him? Idaho has the death penalty. Washington State does not. The murderers surely would have known this. Ordinarily, Bryan would be front and center, speaking more than most of the others. But one of Bryan's classmates, someone who has 4 classes with him that semester and is used to listening to his monologues, notices that he doesn't speak at all. Not once in 3 hours. He's got nothing to say on a topic that has the class revved up. This is extraordinary, the classmate thinks. The classmate assumes Kohberger is ill or tired or something. Ben Roberts, another classmate, remembers dimly that Bryan said he was extra short on sleep in December, but it doesn't occur to anyone that their homophobic, misogynist classmate is anything other than deeply weird. Ben wonders if Bryan is feeling the pressure of being the only one in their cohort from the East Coast, if he's found it hard to adapt to the Pacific Northwest culture. He is running into an entirely new group of people who are now his peers, he said. He doesn't have any seniority over anybody. He doesn't have any authority. He is trying to adapt to a new social structure on the opposite side of the country, and the West Coast does things somewhat differently from the East Coast. Weeks later, Steve Goncalves, his blood boiling at the thought of this Pennsylvania kid who came on purpose to kill us, said something similar. I know my history. The East Coast feels like their superior coast, Steve said, but he's determined not to let the atrocity undermine the very reason he moved his family here, his desire to provide a safe home for his family. So his goal is to make absolutely sure prosecutors get a conviction so the world can see that Idaho is still a sanctuary he believes in. We have farm towns and trusting people, Steve said, but he's underestimated us. December 9th, 2022. Bryan is blowing up again at Professor Snyder. Only 2 days ago, it had seemed as though Bryan might have eked out a Hail Mary. He and Snyder, along with graduate director Dale Williams and Dr. Melanie Angela Newely, so the cohort hears, had met in Wilson Short Hall to discuss Bryan's progress following the improvement plan that had been emailed to him on November 3rd. The plan had told him to be more respectful to women, his professors, his peers, and his students. While not perfect, we agreed that there was progress, Dr. Newely wrote to Bryan, yet the committee still decided it had to terminate him. Because now, just 2 days after that promising meeting, Bryan is losing it for the second time this semester, with Snyder in the professor's office. When Ben and Bryan's cohort hears this, they are mystified about how anyone could rub the affable, easygoing professor the wrong way. To use very coarse language for a second, Ben said, if you fuck up badly enough that you wind up on PIP, a performance improvement plan, as a graduate student, you have done something terrible, dreadfully, miserably wrong. But Bryan cannot control himself in front of Snyder, apparently. The rest of the class has seen what happens to Bryan when he's angry. He goes bright red and clenches his fist so hard that his knuckles turn white. Chief Jenkins heard that one of the thorny issues under discussion is the allegation by a woman student that Bryan followed her to her car. But the discussion spins out of control, way beyond civility, into something angry. 2 days later, on December 11th, Dr. Newelly wrote to Bryan requesting a meeting at which he must have known she would fire him and he would lose his funding. She later wrote in her termination letter of December 19th that she'd requested the meeting because during his altercation with Professor Snyder, it became apparent that you had not made progress regarding professionalism. Bryan will receive this letter when he's back home in Pennsylvania, so the rest of his cohort is in the dark as to what happened. As far as they know, he'll come back in January, but they aren't giving much thought to him and his difficulties. Top of mind for them is a troubling fact that there have been these horrific murders in Moscow, and the police seem to have no clue who did it. So everyone just wants to get the heck out of Dodge for the holidays. December 12th, 2022. Diola Adejuntai, a Washington State University criminal justice undergrad, is puzzled when she looks at her end of semester grade. She sees that Professor Snyder's TA Bryan has posted that she got a B. He's wrong, she thinks. He added up her scores wrong. She deserves an A, so she emails him and tells him he needs to fix it. She's never had a one-on-one interaction with Bryan before. She's seen him in the Professor Snyder's class 3 or 4 times, but not recently. It seems as though he stopped coming to class. She doesn't know why. She assumes he's got stuff of his own to take care of. When he was in class, he was strangely restless and fitted around unnervingly. One time, Professor Snyder asked him to move because the professor said he didn't like people standing behind him while he taught. So Bryan hovered somewhere by the door. It was awkward. At 10:58 p.m., Bryan emails Diola back. I have adjusted the settings to only count your 10 highest scores. This should have a positive impact. Let me know if you have any questions. Good, she thinks. That's taken care of, and she doesn't think about Bryan Kohberger anymore until she sees his mugshot a few days later. And then she thinks that if he committed the murder he's been accused of, it's both odd and interesting that he bothered to answer her email about her grade. December 15th, 2022, Indiana. At 10:45 a.m., the third day of the 4-day cross-country trek east from Pullman, Washington to Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, father and son hear sirens on I-70 outside Indianapolis. Bryan pulls over and waits for the officer to get out of the cop car and approach from the shoulder. 𝐭 Kohberger is in the passenger seat, a buffer between the officer and son. If Bryan fears the worst, he hides any inner turmoil. His face is pale as usual, but his hands are on his lap, relaxed. The sheriff's deputy is disarmingly cordial as he asks for Bryan's license. You were right up on the back of that van. I pulled you over for tailgating. Is this your car? Bryan nods. Where you headed? Now Michael injects himself into the conversation, which goes strangely circuitously. Michael says, well, we're coming from WSU. Sheriff's deputy, what's WSU? Michael says, it's Washington State University. Then he explains there's just been an incident there involving the SWAT team. Bryan interjects, I go to WSU University, basically. No one has answered the deputy's question, so he asks again, so you're coming from Washington State University and you're going where? Michael tells him, we're going to Pennsylvania. He adds conversationally and with emphasis, we're slightly punchy from hours and days of driving. Sheriff's deputy says, what did you say about the SWAT team thing? Michael says, there was a mass shooting and everything. Sheriff's deputy says, interesting. Michael says, well, it's horrifying, actually. The deputy says, so y'all work at the university there? Bryan says, I actually do work there. Michael, with pride, says, he's getting a PhD. The sheriff's deputy says, yeah, I heard about that incident just yesterday, or Michael explains that just an hour and a half ago, they learned that a SWAT team was called in to deal with a gunman hostage situation at WSU. The situation is still wrapping up. He says he thinks they did shoot somebody. Bryan again interrupts his dad. Not sure about that, actually. The conversation has gotten far from tailgating. The cop has got other things to do today. Interesting, he says, and lets them go. Remember, we have seen that too, which is creepy. And I don't believe they pulled him over for tailgating. Not 10 minutes later, the Kohbergers hear sirens again. They are still on I-70. This time, it's the Indiana State Police. Again, the trooper explains he's pulled over because Bryan is tailgating. If Bryan senses anything strange or threatening about the second stop, he hides it well. This time, Michael looks slightly nonplussed when the officer appears as the passenger window. But again, the officer's quick to let them go. I'm not going to give you guys another ticket or warning if you guys just stop. Just make sure you give yourself plenty of room. It's all about how fast you're going, okay? Then he asks, where y'all headed? When they answer, he laughs. That's a long haul. You guys scared of airplanes? 4 weeks, months, for weeks and months, years in fact, after Kohberger is arrested, it is reported that Indiana stops were not random. It's reported that the FBI already had Kohberger in their sights, that the FBI had a single engine plane tracking him, that the FBI hadn't looped Moscow into what they knew. So yeah, they weren't on accident and random. Many articles mention this, and Chief James Fry gets irritated every time he reads one because it's not only off base, it's completely nuts. He's pissed that the only leak in the entire investigation came not from any of the people who worked directly with him, but he believes from the Pennsylvania's branch of the FBI. So tell me this, if you can keep their mouth shut, they're getting ready to arrest a person. Do you think they can keep their mouth shut about a plane tracking the killer all the way across the United States? He asked sarcastically. Yet again, in his view, the media knows nothing and wants nothing to make a buck Yet again, in his view, the media knows nothing and wants to make a buck off something. It makes a great story, he says wryly. It's also completely untrue. If that truly would have happened and I would have found out about it, you would have probably seen the roof of the police department come off. The boring truth of it is, as far as Fry knows, and as a spokesperson for the FBI has unusually stated on record, the stops in Indiana were random. I don't believe that. The timeline of the investigation indicates that law enforcement had not yet homed in on Bryan on December 15th. Brett Payne hadn't even heard the name Bryan Kohberger until the FBI phoned on December 19th. He didn't try to obtain warrants for Kohberger's phone records until December 23rd. It was only in the days right before Christmas that threads connecting the touch DNA on the knife sheath, the right model of the white Hyundai Elantra, its new license plate, and the owner came together. And then the phone records all pointed to Bryan Kohberger. On December 15th, when the Kohbergers were pulled over, law enforcement still didn't have him. The Kohbergers arrived in Pennsylvania on December 16th without being stopped again, and Fry's team was later able to see that the car had reached home. But in that moment, Kohberger was still safe. He was still below the radar of Fry's team, although that was changing by the minute. December 28th, Albright's, Pennsylvania. Bryan gets in the car. He's cleaned every inch of it, inside and out, and doesn't drive to the end of Monroe County and back. And it drives to the end of Monroe County and back. He doesn't know it, but he's got eyes on him every second. The car and his phone are being tracked. There's a team of Pennsylvania state troopers in the woods surrounding 119 Lambsden Drive, surveilling it around the clock. They've been there since yesterday at dawn. They've seen him depositing the garbage into neighbors' bins. Bryan has no idea that they've taken the family garbage or that a forensics lab will determine that there is 99.9998% chance that the DNA collected from the trash bag belongs to the father of the persons whose DNA was on the knife sheath besides Maddie at 1122 King Road. He has no idea, basically, that it's game over. December 29th, 2022. Pennsylvania. When FBI agents stormed the Kohberger family home, blowing the door down and the windows out, raiding it, in Kohberger's car, they have warrants for everything and anything that could connect him to the murders at 1122 King Road. Pennsylvania State Trooper Justin Leary signs his name on each of the 2 long lists that go into the FBI's receipt of property document, which will be made public months later. We did just recently look at that too on the last document dump that we did. From Bryan's car, they take swabs, Ziploc bag with pink zipper, 7 quarters, plastic baggie with green zipper, 36 dimes, 32 nickels, 8 pennies, gloves, receipts, car insurance card, car registration, hiking boots, comfort inn room key holder and stay information, tire irons, shovel, goggles, floor mats, reflective vest, used water bottles, wrench, door panel, seats and seat cushions, headrest, seat belt, visor, fiber, brake pedal, gas pedal, phone charger, Band-Aid, wrappers, maps, document, seat belt, and boot. From the Kohberger family home, they take items that quite obviously could connect Bryan to the firefighter of Dylan Mortensen's half-awake dream, an assortment of clothing including black face masks, hats, gloves, and boots. They take his phone, laptops, hard drives, computer, the black box Samsung car navigation system, as well as 3 knives, including a large sheath Taylor cutlery knife, a gun, a Glock 22, and 3 magazines. They also take a flashlight, 2 bags of the green leafy substance, and an AT&T phone bill, and a large Craftsman shop vacuum. A green leafy substance, eh? More tantalizing on Larry's list are items that are not fully explained, but that could suggest a possible motive for murder. It's the conclusion that these catches the attention of the cyber sleuths when the list is made public months later. For instance, the list interestingly mentions a book. It doesn't give a title, which with underlinings on page 118. All the other online forums, the Facebook discussion page, Reddit, TikTok, Instagram, and more will debate for days if this could be the underlining on page 118 of Elliot Rodgers' manifesto. On that page, Roger wrote of how he came to select the date of the days of retribution, of the heavy law enforcement presence. He decided it would have to be on a normal party weekend, so I set it for some time during November. Then there's the item on Larry's list of a drawing referred to as a man's mind. Could this be a reference to well-known black and white poster of a man's face in the profile with a naked woman erotically arched backward, cleverly drawn into his frontal lobe? The name Sigmund Freud is scribbled underneath. That's the question posed by cyber sleuths, who post the drawing side by side with page 118 of Rogers' manifesto and suggest, to much agreement, that both point to the mindset of a misogynistic incel who planned a murder that was more of a less of a copycat of Rogers' 2014 killing spree as a vengeance for all the women who would not want to sleep with him. An incel that planned a murder was a copycat of Rogers. Other miscellaneous items are harder for the online community to analyze. These include a note to dad from Bryan, a note in his desk, a note from Bryan to Montana, a criminal psychology book, other criminology books, a maroon notebook, documents, and the DeSales University handbook. As the items are being seized and documented on the other side of the country in Pullman at 10:38 p.m. PST, 1:38 a.m. EST, Chief Jenkins gets the call from Moscow he's been waiting for. Kohberger has been arrested in Pennsylvania. Some of Fry's team, led by Sergeant Dustin Blaker, are already en route to sit outside Kohberger's Pullman apartment while Jenkins' crew and paper and serve the warrants. By 7:15 a.m., the paperwork is done, and while Jenkins' team watches, a Moscow team goes into looking for evidence that ties Kohberger to the King Road murders. They take, according to papers filed in court, 1 nitrile black glove, 1 Walmart receipt with 1 Dickies tag, 2 Marshall's receipts, a dust container from Bissell Power Force vacuum, 8 possible hair strands, 1 fire TV stick with cord plug, 1 possible animal hair strand, 1 possible hair, 1 possible hair, 1 possible hair, 1 possible hair strand, 1 computer tower, 1 collection of red dark spot collected without testing. Why was that collected without testing? 2 cuttings from uncased pillows of reddish brown stain, large stain tested. 2 top and bottom of mattress covers packaged separately, both labeled C. Multiple stains, 1 tested. When this list is published, it isn't just the internet forums that focus on the possible animal hair strand, along with the blood stains and human hair as being vital importance. Steve Goncalves wonders if the hair could belong to Murphy, Kaylee's golden doodle, now in Jack's care. She loved to sleep with Murphy, so the question I want answered is who put Murphy in a separate room that night? If it was Bryan Kohberger, well, Steve thinks that could have been a costly mistake. I always did wonder that, how the dog let Bryan move him. Or maybe that's why he was barking so much. I'm not sure. December 30th, 2022, Monroe County, Pennsylvania. They hold him in the Monroe County Correctional Facility in Stroudsburg, about 25 miles from his parents' house. They talk to him for nearly 15 minutes. Bryan Kohberger is charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder for Zana, Ethan, Maddie, and Kaylee, and on 1 count of felony burglary for breaking into the 1122 King Road. They've swabbed him for DNA several times. Presumably, the samples are in a lab being analyzed right now. But Bryan knows no more than about what law enforcement has on him. According to Idaho law, Brett Payne's probable cause affidavit must remain sealed until the suspect is back in the state. At first, Bryan says he doesn't need a lawyer. He's calm. When he's asked if he knows what murders they are talking about, he says, yes, of course. Yes, certainly I'm aware of what's going on. I'm 10 miles away from this, he says. And then suddenly he changes his mind and he asks for a lawyer. While he waits, he's given a dark green blanket like suicide prevention vest to wear. As a Fox News reporter explained, suicide prevention vests are used to ensure warmth and comfort while not obstructing the wearer's movements, according to PSB Corp, a maker of tactical and suicide prevention gear. The vest also cannot be rolled or torn and prevent inmates from using the fabric to create a weapon or hanging mechanism. On the morning of December 30th, Jason Labar, the chief public defender for Monroe County, comes to see Bryan. Labar said he was astonished when he first got the call. Of course, he knew about the murders, but for the suspect to be in Monroe County, I did not expect that. Labar finds that his new client is calm in all of their 4 meetings over the next 3 days, unusually calm given the circumstances. Bryan tells the lawyer that he was shocked when the agents burst into his parents' home waving guns in his face. Labar said that in his experience, and as he has quite a lot of experience, every defendant reacts differently. Kohberger seems to want to chat. It's as if he's got a story he wants to tell Labar, but the lawyer cuts him off. I really wanted to make sure that Kohberger understood that I didn't want to know about the facts and the circumstances. Labar explains to Bryan that he's there only to handle the extradition proceedings, that someone in Idaho will be appointed to act as his criminal lawyer, that the only way for Bryan to learn he's been charged with these crimes is to fly back to Idaho. Only then will the probable cause affidavit, the document filed by the police with enough to justify the arrest and search warrants, be available to him. Labar is just as in the dark as his client. Labar is almost surprised by how quickly Bryan agrees to waive his rights in Pennsylvania and be extradited. His client wants to understand what the police think they know. He was very candid with me about the extradition, Labar says, which made my job easier. So did Bryan's obviously high intelligence and working with knowledge of criminal law. Labar works with Bryan on the wording of what he, in his role as chief public defender, will say to the media. Journalists noted that it did not explicitly state he was innocent. On Saturday, December 31st, Labar issues that statement. It reads, Mr. Kohberger has been accused of a very serious crimes, but the American justice system cloaks him in a veil of innocence. He should be presumed innocent until otherwise. He has not tried in the court of public opinion. One should not pass judgment about the facts of the case unless there is a fair trial in court, at which time all sides may be heard and inferences challenged. Mr. Kohberger is eager to be exonerated of these charges and looks forward to resolving these matters as promptly as possible. Chapter 100, Moscow County, Pennsylvania, January 3rd, 2023. Dressed in a red prison jumpsuit, Bryan walks into the Monroe County Court of Common Pleas in Stroudsburg for the extradition hearing. He looks 3 times at his family. The person he gazes at directly is his father, Michael. Bryan even smiles faintly. As Judge Patty Worthington questions him as to whether he's fully understood that he's waiving his rights in Pennsylvania and will be flown to Idaho to face 4 charges of murder, Marianne Kohberger collapses. A court official rushes over and provides Kleenex. Miss Kohberger's eyes are so swollen from crying that she can barely see as the proceedings finish. 2 nights ago, the family released a statement that they had worked on with Labar, and it reads, First and foremost, we care deeply for the 4 families who have lost their precious children. There are no words that can adequately express the sadness we feel, and we pray each day for them. We will continue to let the legal process unfold, and as a family, we will love and support our son and brother. We have fully cooperated with law enforcement agencies in an attempt to seek the truth and promote his presumption of innocence rather than judge unknown facts and make erroneous assumptions. We request privacy in this matter as our family and the family suffering loss can move forward through the legal process. After the judge signs the extradition order and they've said goodbye to Bryan, who walks out of the courthouse flanked by guards, the Kohbergers return to their home with its blown out windows and doors. Privacy is something they will find they have lost. You know, I have something to say. I think this is very much like the Gabby Petito case. Michael Kohberger knows what was up. I think he knows what happened. I think Bryan told him beforehand. That's just my opinion. Don't come for me. I really do believe that. And I also believe The Landrys, from Gabby Petito case. I believe they knew as well. Pullman Moscow Regional Airport, Pullman, Washington, January 4th, 2023. We're going to read just a few, maybe 2 more chapters. The single-prop plane makes 2 refueling stops, first at Willard Airport in Savoy, Illinois, then in Rapid City, South Dakota, on its journey from Pennsylvania to Pullman. A sea of law enforcement members of the 𝐭𝐤𝐞𝐥𝐥𝐲 County Sheriff's Office arrive at 5:15 p.m. ahead of the 6:23 scheduled landing. It's pitch dark when Bryan gets out. Cuffed, but the flashes pop and media can see his distinctive features as he towers over the officers flanking him. He's got a dark winter jacket on over his red prison clothes. Agents load him into a black SUV and make the 8-mile drive to 𝐭𝐤𝐞𝐥 County Jail beside the courthouse in Moscow, where they book him. Then he waits in a small cell for a lawyer for the wheels of justice to start turning, moving him towards his eventual trial for mass murder. As far as law enforcement knows, it's Kohbergers' first time back in Moscow since his brief visit to King Road 4 hours after he allegedly committed the murders. This time, he's here to stay for the foreseeable future. Part 5, The Blame Game. I'm going to read chapter 102, and then we're going to end this live, and we'll continue with this reading tomorrow. I thought I would be able to finish it today, and I might be back for a later reading. We're so close. We literally only need like another hour, possibly. We'll continue reading it on probably another live. I do have a few more lives planned for today, so we'll see. But let's continue this. Chapter 102, Priest Lake, Idaho, December 29th, 2022. It's late after 10:30 p.m. and the Chapins are headed to bed. Stacy is showering when Jim hears her phone ring. He looks at the caller ID. He knows something big must have happened for Tyson Barrett to be calling so late. Stace, you need to come get this, he yells. Stace comes out and hears from Barrett that they have just arrested a guy named Bryan Kohberger. She and Jim go to Hunter and Maisie's bedroom and tell him the news. That night, for the first time in weeks, Jim Chapin sleeps well. They all do. Kohberger's arrest can't bring Ethan back, but Maisie and Hunter are headed back to UI in a few days, and Maisie was worried that whoever murdered Ethan was still around campus lurking. Stacy and Jim assured her that the UI campus right then was probably the safest in the country, but privately, behind their closed bedroom door, they expressed to each other that maybe Maisie was right to be concerned. So the fact that police have arrested someone comes as a huge relief. They have no idea what his connection to Ethan is, and they are not interested in finding out. The bottom line is that their son is in a jar in their basement, and nothing can change that. But when Jim sees Kohberger's face on the news, weirdly, it resonates. He just looked like a bad guy, the long drawn face. He just fit the picture that I had in my mind, he later said. Jim is glad that they've got him. He wants this guy to pay, and he feels certain that he will, no matter what happens next. Stace will not shoot me for saying this, but there's 3 ways you can look at it. He's either going to go to jail for life, or he's going to put to death, or he's going to walk out the front door. And I'm okay with any one of them, because the outcome for him is going to be the same. What he means is that Kohberger is not likely to survive even if he gets off. This is Idaho, after all. You really think Steve Goncalves, Jim asked him months later with a wry smile, is going to sit back while he walks around freely? The answer is no. And I love the Goncalves family. And you've seen them at the court hearings and the plea hearing and the interviews. And I think they're amazing. Rathdrum, Idaho, Chapter 103, December 29th, 2022. There's relief for the Goncalves family too, of course, after Tyson Barrett tells them the news. Tomorrow's a joint memorial for Kaylee and Maddie. Now the family can focus on the service without the fear that their murderer is watching. They have no idea what the connection can be between the girls and the police have captured. Between the girls and the guy the police have captured. This criminology PhD student at WSU. And what's the deal with WSU? How and why did the school protect him if he'd been the menace he seemed to be on social media? Steve hears from Olivia, who is plugged into social media, about all the red flags Kohberger exhibited. Students started posting them once the rest was made public. The more he learns, the angrier he gets. Just because this was a school environment, it seems to him this guy, Steve doesn't like to say his name, got protections he would not otherwise have had. WSU hasn't published any of the disciplinary problems the school faced with Kohberger. Steve Goncalves isn't going to stop with his own investigation just because they've got him in custody. Half of the stuff I found and dug up on him, and the shit hasn't come out, and it pisses me off. They've really clammed up, he said. Steve plans to keep up the pressure on the prosecution the same way he did on the cops. He's going to search the dark web for any piece of data he can find. He's going to look for the guy's cell records, his social media posts. He's going to leave no digital stone unturned. Steve wants to make sure, absolutely sure, that Bill Thompson gets a conviction. Anything less would not be serving Kaylee. Chapter 104, December 30th, Pullman, Washington. Journalist Evan Ellis is live on air that Friday when he sees a text from Chief Fry holding a press conference at 1 p.m. There are many press conferences held by Moscow PD these days, so Ellis doesn't pay much attention. This was a mistake, he later realizes, because the chief had never given him a heads up on any of those. Ellis is still on air when the news breaks in Pennsylvania. It's a leak. Agents have arrested Bryan Kohberger, a WSU criminology PhD student. Oh shit, Ellis thinks, experiencing a rare feeling of shock. The murder had been walking among them. He needs to report if Kohberger was at WSU, he's been living in Pullman, and if he's been living in Pullman, the Moscow team is going to be raiding his apartment right now. Ellis phones a source in law enforcement and asks where in the area he might bump into out-of-state authorities executing a search warrant. The source tells him, I'd go to the Steptoe Village apartments. Ellis arrives just as the raid is getting started and records it for his Facebook page. But even as he clocks the scene in front of him, his mind is racing to what comes next. Based on his experience, he fears that the administration at Washington State University, his alma mater, will go into communications lockdown. My wife works there, and she shows me some of the crap that WSU sends out internally, which is do not say anything, do not talk to anybody, this is not happening, you're not talking. And of course, they can't prevent people from doing it, but they're extremely vindictive up there and everybody's scared. Ellis and the WSU Vice President of Marketing and Communications, Phil Weiler, have long had a continuous relationship. I fight with WSU on a weekly basis, he says, about hiding information and shutting out taxpayers. It's completely disgusting and sad, but Washington State University has been doing it for years. Today is no different, he thinks. In fact, it's worse. Evans phones Wheeler. He texts him. He emails nothing. At noon, the school issues a statement that reads, Law enforcement officials in Pennsylvania have arrested Bryan Kohberger, a Washington State University graduate student, in connection with quadruple homicide that took place in Moscow, Idaho in November. On behalf of the WSU Pullman community, I want to offer my sincere thanks to all of law enforcement agencies that have been working tirelessly to solve this crime, says Elizabeth Chilton, Chancellor of WSU Pullman campus and WSU Provost. This horrific act has shaken everyone in the Palouse region. We also want to extend our deepest sympathies to the families, friends, and Vandal colleagues who were impacted by these murders, Chilton says. We will long feel the loss of these young people and Moscow Pullman community and hope announcement today will be a step towards healing. This morning, the Washington State University Police Department assisted Idaho law enforcement officials in the execution of search warrants at Mr. Kohberger's apartment and office, which are both located on the WSU Pullman campus. WSU police are working closely with local, state, and federal law enforcement officials as they continue their investigation. Kohberger had completed his first semester as a PhD student in WSU's criminal justice program earlier this month. Ellis thinks this isn't good enough. Where's the transparency? Accountability for hiring Kohberger? Any apology? He posted a Facebook video that afternoon in which he repeats Wheeler's name 3 times for effect. We have reached out multiple times to WSU spokesman Phil Weiler for more information on Kohberger as WS student. Phil has failed to return any emails, texts, or phone calls in regards to the rest of the WSU student a doctoral student in criminology, and any information from the WSU on the suspect has been denied at this point, with no response from Phil, the spokesman at Washington State University. He later tells his listeners that part of his frustration with the college is based on the history that goes back 2 decades. Bryan Kohberger is not the first high-profile criminal connected to this department, to this University Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology. Wow, I didn't know that. On Route 270 between Moscow and Pullman, Evan tells his listeners there's a road sign commemorating 3 WSU fatalities. In 2001, a 22-year-old student, Frederick Russell, was charged with the vehicular homicide of 3 Washington State University students and of injuring 4 others in a horrific crash on that highway. Fred was drunk at the time. His father, Gregory Russell, was head of the criminal justice department. Fred was arrested, but 3 days later, he was due to stand before a preliminary hearing. He escaped, accompanied by a WSU criminal justice graduate and Russell family friend. He spent 6 years on the lam and was featured on U.S. Marshals Most Wanted list before being captured in Ireland. Evan doesn't hide his disgust. This is how deep it goes with that dumpster fire of an institution that I went into, he says. As it happens, the mayor of Pullman, Glenn Johnson, who's a regular on Evan's show and a friend of his, also knows the story of the Russells. Mayor Johnson, who holds a master's degree in journalism and PhD in mass communication, shares Evan's frustrations with Washington State University stonewalling. That the school where he taught classes in subjects like television news and communications management for 30 years before becoming mayor employed the guy arrested for the Moscow murders is a bridge too far, he thinks. Something needs to happen at that school. Something needs to change. So when he finds himself in an emergency meeting with WSU Chancellor Elizabeth Chilton, he says, "Elizabeth, in case you hadn't been told, this is the second time there's a bad story coming out of Washington State University's Criminal Justice Department. He figures she probably does not know about the Russells because she's new. She started in January 2022. So the point is," he says in conclusion, "this," he means Kohberger, "is the second black eye for the WSU Criminal Justice Department." He adds with the flourish, "You only have 2 eyes." I'm going to end it there. We're ending at chapter 105, and we have only about maybe 80 pages more to go. So I will be back either later today with another reading of the book. If not, we will finish the book tomorrow. Make sure you like and subscribe, please, to my channel and get notifications set, because I do go live doing all kinds of things on here. We do true crime, but we do hangout lives too, party lives. We do like all of the above. So make sure you turn on your notifications. Make sure you are subscribed. Thank you for being here through the reading. I'm so excited to finish the book. If you have not caught up on the book, there's part 1 and 2 in the Kohberger playlist. And today was part 3. So like I said, I'll either be back later and finish it today, which I most likely will do. And then we can start with a whole new set of true crime cases tomorrow, the new week. Thank you, Augie, for being here. I love and appreciate you. And thank you, everyone, for being here. Make sure you hit the like button on the way out, and I will see you in the next live shortly. Thank you. Bye.